Welcome to Common Sense. I'm John.
And I'm Ed. How are you, John?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Ed?
Well, it was a good Patriots weekend, so.
Yeah, no, shut up. We always have this conversation every year at this time, so.
Yeah, but one of these years we won't be having it anymore, and then everyone else will be able to gloat. But it's been a great 15 years in Boston sports between the Red Sox and the Bruins, and
just rub it in. Yeah,
looked like they were coming strong. I mean, they had a couple good years, but I mean, it's been great. So I'm sure we're due for a drought, and we'll just gloat a little bit until it happens.
Yeah, we'll see.
In the meantime, before we turn everybody off and board you and you stop
listening. It's sports radio time, right?
Together, we're Common Sense. So it's not sports radio, it's business, it's revenue growth radio. And, as Common Sense, John and I kind of enjoy pulling on threads of perceived wisdom or whatever you want to call it in the B2B marketing and sales space, and often try to find some bad habits or old ideas or hypocrisy where we can challenge them and, have fun talking about it, but open up a conversation too. And so today, the topic that we're going to yank on and hopefully pull a couple people's chains is lead follow-up. Because if you listen to kind of two dominant schools of thought, you either have to do one thing or you have to do the other. And people are completely locked into that and passionate about it. So kick us off, John.
Well, I think you're right. So the two main schools of thought there are one that says you're a lead, I'm going to chase you down, I'm going to qualify you right away, and then I'm going to try to close you. So that's your classic, sales strategy, I guess you'd say. The other says we're glad you found us, found our website. We hope you enjoy our content. We're here to help, and we'll reach out to you when you're ready to talk. So that's kind of your classic, or at least original inbound marketing approach. So these two approaches are pretty much mutually exclusive, but there's, of course, a middle ground, and there's a lot of different flavors of this depending on what industry you're in. But a middle ground would be collecting enough data to help the sales team qualify the leads in advance and then follow up directly on the ones that you think are really ready. And that could be signified by some kind of behavior like checking out your pricing page. So that's kind of your middle ground. But the way we see it, we talk to a lot of companies and most of them go one way or the other with the extremes. And I guess the question is, which is better in your opinion? There is data to support both. Proponents of, the rapid follow-up, they really point to two key metrics. One is really the tight correlation between that rapid follow-up, say within 5 minutes of conversion, leading to much higher close rates. And then the second would be if you do some lead nurturing along the way, say you send out, a series of emails and voicemails and social media posts and so on. If you do that consistently, that also leads to higher conversion rates into sales. And that would indicate that, if that works better for you, then your people, they want to connect, but they're just not totally frantic about doing it right this second. So, the opponents of the rapid direct follow-up, they point to surveys that say that people are really reluctant to download anything these days if they're forced to submit a form. So it's kind of come back on that inbound philosophy. And that's especially true if they're forced to convert on forms multiple times over, the lifetime of a lead nurturing campaign. And the bottom line is those people just don't want to be harassed with endless calls and emails, whether or not they provide any additional value. So I guess it really does boil down to high pressure sales tactics versus purely inbound sales. Which one of those do you subscribe to?
Well, so I would frame it a little bit differently. I mean, we've talked often about how everything ends up so binary. And so if one perspective is it's high pressure sales versus inbound. Another is this question of mechanically, do you gate content or put it behind a form, or do you make all the content public? And David Meerman Scott's been writing a lot about just put it all out there and eventually it'll work for you and people will find you, even though you don't know who's consuming it. They'll eventually find value and reach out to you. But how about if we look at it differently? How about if instead of thinking about the tactics from our perspective, we understand it from the buyer's perspective? People want to be helped and people don't want to be sold. I think those are universal. Now, the further you are in your buying process, the help that you want may look more like selling. How do I get the deal done? How long is it going to take to put it in? That kind of stuff. But it's really about answering your questions and helping you understand how to buy. So people assume that when you follow up with them after they've taken some kind of action, filled out a form, that what you're doing is you're coming to sell them. And that's where I think the resistance comes from. It's not filling out the form. It's not having a conversation with a salesperson. It's the fact that they don't want to get sold. If you filled out a form on your doctor's website and they didn't follow up, you'd be pissed at them. Yeah, so yeah. It's not the form itself, and it's not the fact that somebody's following. It's the context that somebody is responding and helping you in a way that you want to be helped, as opposed to responding based on their selfish interest. We converted a lead. Let's figure out if it's qualified. Let's move it in the middle of the funnel. Let's put it on the pipeline to close next quarter. And that's about us. That's not about the buyers. So if we change the way we think about it from that selfish perspective as marketers and sellers, we want leads, and shift it to our perspective as buyers, which is we want help, we want insight, then I think that comes to answer the question. Now, in some ways, it's going to make it more complicated because it's going to relieve us of the burden of chasing people down that don't want to talk to us, but it's going to put a bigger burden on us of figuring out who does want to talk to us and being educated and helpful and resourceful enough to provide them the kind of information they want. So it also makes it less black and white and more gray. How do you do that? And that means salespeople have to be better. They have to be more empathetic. They have to be better trained. They have to understand buyers' businesses. And behind it all, just like this consistent theme or this thread that runs throughout Common Sense, the book, and our discussions, it's a mindset change. And it's a management commitment to changing the culture and the training. And it comes down really to a very different set of skills for salespeople. Do you agree, or am I crazy, John?
Well, since I co-wrote the book with you, I have to agree, but I do agree. And I think the operative word there is change. So that's the tough part, obviously. If you want to change the mindset to a more sustained helping approach, you're going to have to train your salespeople to be different in several ways. And granted, quite a few of them have already made this change over the years. But being a lot more familiar with the buyer's business is a big step, so that you're more like a reference, you're more like a resource than you are a salesperson. And so sales reps need to be able to advise their prospects and answer specific questions, not just sort of put it off to another meeting or another expert. And then, realizing kind of where you are in the buyer journey, so that the specifics of your product or service don't necessarily apply early on in the process. You have to be patient, in other words, and kind of bring the topic around to where those solutions actually make sense. So to do that, you have to understand the problem they're trying to solve in depth and knowing, kind of where they are in the buyer journey. Now you can use another skill is utilizing data to help you get there, more efficiently and more effectively. So buyer intent data, engagement data from your marketing automation system. How do they respond to emails? What pages do they visit? Things like that can really help you understand kind of the context that you were talking about. And then, to do all that, you probably need to commit to some training and having systems in place that can support that effort. Some sales enablement, for example, having the right content available that you could instantly send at the right time to answer a certain question. All of that can be very effective, but it requires some change. And we might call that advanced sales nowadays, the kind of thing that we recommend in Common Sense Revenue Growth. But it's really the key. Putting these things in place is really the key to turning this mindset around, and being able to answer the question, when and how is the best time to follow up? Not necessarily, on or off, a call, But what exact methodology and intensity do you need for a follow-up? So follow up on that a little bit. What about that method and intensity?
And that's where the art comes in. It's not all science. We can build workflows and we can build lead scoring, but there's art. And that's why great salespeople, I think, I don't care what you say about AI, great salespeople won't go away because they can master that art. I think you approach it a couple different ways. The reality is we're all individuals. We've all got our own preferences and habits. And sometimes there's topics that I'm just curious about. And sometimes I'm trying to solve a problem that's urgent and remains so. Other times I'm trying to solve a problem and then something changes and 2 days later it's not urgent anymore. The need fades. So there's no blanket answer. Some days I'm just so busy I'm not going to talk to anybody. And some days I'm head down working on something, writing. I don't want to be interrupted. So, even though my expectations change and how I want the information, there's also changes in how willing I am to receive the information. So that makes it complicated. And, it's easy to say, well, you call people 7 times, you email them 3 times, you call them twice, you connect on social, and that may not necessarily be the answer. This kind of leads to the whole conversational marketing question. Drift talks about now. You look at Drift stuff and there's the big capital letters now with an exclamation point are featuring a lot of what they're doing. And the premise of that, of course, I think is indisputable. Nobody is ever going to be more engaged than when they're on your website. If they're actually looking at your site, concentrating, moving around it, reading what's there, that is the most engaged they'll ever be, aside from perhaps when they're reading a contract or signing a purchase order. So if you can connect with them right then, when they're thinking about it, and they're only marginally distracted by all the other stuff they're worried about, that's the best time. And then you can easily gauge what they would expect in terms of speed and intensity of the follow-up. That's the power of the bots. Using bots, you can kind of quickly and seamlessly not only provide contextual content to help them, but find out, and make it easy and seamless for them to book a meeting with a salesperson if that's in fact the appropriate step and that's what they want to do. So when I think about my preferences, I hate calls from unknown caller ID. I'm okay knowing that it's somebody calling to sell me. I hate when they're hiding it, and I hate manipulative emails. I got one the other day that was written as though the sales manager had looked in LinkedIn. Oh, this is a perfect fit. We could really help them. We give them a ring and see if you can set up a call. And that was like from the BDR to me. And it was patently manipulative the way it was done. And I don't think that works well. But since I sell, I also want to try to buy in a way that's reasonable, because I don't like getting hassled when I'm trying to sell somebody. And so I try to reciprocate. So all of that being said, I'm okay with somebody emailing me. I'm okay with somebody calling me. I'm okay with somebody maybe even connecting on social, although more and more you connect on LinkedIn and then you just get hammered with these messages. But trying to reach me several times over a few weeks to find that day when I'm available and talk about it, I'm okay with it. I'm not okay with those breakup emails anymore and that kind of stuff. But, the 3 email nurturing sequence doesn't work. All that being said, after my brief personal rant there, it's really easy for us to also project our personal preferences onto other people. Well, I don't want to talk to somebody when I fill out a form, so nobody else is going to want to. That's something I hear from engineers a lot, for instance. And it's important that we accept the fact that we're individuals, as each of them are, and account for that, and account for people having different days, bad days, and offer options if, in fact, what we're trying to do is provide people ways to help. So I want people that can intuit the problems I'm wrestling with, that will share insights. And I'm willing to read, all this stuff about how, people won't read. Again, I don't want to project my preferences onto others. I'm willing to read. I'm willing to watch. I'm willing to listen if I believe that they're going to help me fix my problem or understand it. I'm not willing to spend time if it's just learning about them. And I think that the challenge is trying to understand from buyers' behavior, filter these binary messages that we get, yes, do it, no, do it, no, don't do it, and balance that against our personal preferences that we tend to project onto others. What do you think about buyers in general? Or, am I an aberration in the way I bounce around, or is that common?
Well, you're an aberration, of course, but we all are, actually. I think the key, though, is finding things that we all have in common and making sure that those things are thought about. So, we've all been conditioned by companies like Amazon And we all have this expectation that regardless of what we're trying to buy, it always has that same kind of seamless experience. We can find it easily. We can find out what we need to know easily. We can, navigate down simple paths to get what we want. And we can get whatever it is when we want it exactly, and how we want it delivered. So those are our basic expectations that really I think everyone has now. We've all been conditioned by that. So some basic things that every company, B2B and B2C, needs to think about is making your website, your content, and your follow-up all creating value for the buyer, really seamless, really easy to do, very frictionless. You don't want that pushy experience necessarily, but you want things customized to the way you want to buy, as you were just describing. So I think, another thing to think about in addition to that kind of workflow or that customer experience is, what is it like to actually talk to somebody either by chat or by phone at the sellers? And so the tone and the message must really reflect that empathy and courtesy, which we all expect now. For a while there, we got used to people that didn't even speak our language, just kind of being rude and handing us off to other departments and all that kind of thing. But we're past that. So it's got to be, whoever we talk to needs to be very, have that common sort of human to human touch, in addition to being an expert in what we're trying to find out. And I think if we can do all those things, really smooth out the customer experience and gain that sort of human to human touch, people will start regarding everything we do as, not sort of a hostile act of sales. And, realizing that what does—
That's a great expression. We got to hashtag that, John. Hostile act of sales. I mean, that captures the essence of what's wrong, right?
Okay. I'm going to send out a request for trademark right now. Anyway, as we've been talking about, what really doesn't work is sort of the classic sales reps and BDRs working under this time pressure load and monthly quotas. That's what really leads to this high pressure tactics. And that also leads to lost sales and lost leads along the way. So I think to sum up, it's not really about whether or not to follow up on leads. It's really about following up the right way and treating your leads the way they want to be treated. It's important to meet their expectations along the buying journey. And then, like you said, offering them options to engage in real time is crucial. And being prepared at that time to really answer their questions is also crucial. You don't want to, again, just be there to hand off to somebody else, because that's right, really off-putting. And I don't think gated content is out of the question. It really depends, at understanding what your buyers want, and that they want to be treated the way they want to be treated is key to that. So you don't mind, they won't mind, as you said, filling out a form as long as it's for something valuable. But the thing to do is not keep asking them to fill out more forms so you can compile that data along the way and just, then be robotic about your emails, mentioning their Aunt Maisie, that you saw something about her, because that's completely inappropriate. So you don't want to bombard them. You don't want to keep sending them offers that they aren't interested in. So all those things you got to sort of balance out and think about. And it's not necessarily about having a strategy for each individual lead, but it's almost like that. So you really create these agile systems that address that. So do you agree with my summary?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we kind of always come back to the same point that this stuff is complicated. It's not easy to do, and it's brutally hard to do it well and do it consistently. And this whole thing about you can put in the 3 bullet points and it's always just a clear binary, yes or no, such and such is good, such and such is bad, is really, I think, misleading. And it's particularly a problem for companies that are early in their digital journey, because they hear that as authoritative rather than as positioning, and they tend to take that and run with it. I guess the golden rule is something you can always kind of turn back to. It's, sell unto others as you would want to be sold to unto yourself, or help others as you would want to be helped. So that's probably the best guideline that somebody can use to think about how whether it's gating their content or sending an automatic follow-up email. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Ed.
And I'm John, and together we're Common Sense. And if you want a deeper perspective on this topic and other topics, please check out our book, Common Sense Revenue Growth. That's available on Amazon, or you can find it by going to commonsenserevenuegrowth.com. We also have a podcast of all of our conversations on riptidepress.com. See you next time.